The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
So, I know we don't really start the show on time a lot, but this is ridiculous. I mean, this is there's late and then there's this. I mean, we're a whole segment behind. We are 14 minutes to be exact behind, but we're glad that we're here. Apparently, our guy Casey, who celebrated his 27th birthday, I believe, went too hard in the paint last night, and that's why we're a little behind. Actually, I have no clue why he's not here today. It's a coincidence that it's the morning after his birthday that he went and celebrated, and he's not in today. I haven't been told why. I'm just going to assume he went out and had a great time. But we welcome you in off the bench, Justin Kinner, Elliot Ruring, Jacob Tissett. Guys, were you out with Casey last night? Are we sure he made it home? How's he feeling today?
We were out with him, so we went to we had a birthday dinner for him. We went to Agave and Rye here in Hamilton.
Great establishment.
Great establishment. Reed, myself, Jacob, and Casey had a good time. And I don't know. I think Casey might have gotten too lit, and he went home and he partied like it was 1999. I think that's what happened. And now we're all here and late, fashionably late.
I see people jumping on my case in the chat saying, no wonder they're late. Jacob's producing.
No, not Jacob's
Believe it or
fault.
not, we have an excuse today, as we normally do. But there were cords missing. Casey hid some cords.
Well, I wasn't going to name him.
I will.
I wasn't going to name him. I wasn't, for the record. So I want to be the bigger man right now and say I'm not going to say Casey's name.
I will.
Okay.
Well, first of all, what Casey does is so damn complicated, and we literally always shout him out because of what he does behind that chair over there. So reps, you need a lot of reps to master what he does over there. And Jacob is the fill-in, but Jacob doesn't get a ton of reps over there because Casey hogs it all when he's not fixing his roof, of course. But no, Jacob, he only had 3 shows of Grip It and Rip It to get used to that over there. So it's not like he's a seasoned vet, but he knows just enough to be dangerous. So no, it's definitely not on anybody. But shout out to Casey. We'll get him back soon, of course. But we're happy to be with you. Ton to get into. Jason Fitz going to hang out with us in a bit. We're going to talk about the Bengals, their offseason, the AFC North, NFL as a whole. He'll join us later on in the show. MLB Network put out a top 10 general manager ranking, and normally I don't really care about general managers, but who they have at number 1 is kind of silly in my opinion, and we'll discuss that coming up here in a bit. A little news or not news. We got a lot of stuff to dive into there to cover the whole landscape of sports, of course, and we try to mix it up. And then Terry Francona is done a couple sound bites from him at spring training that we'll get to around the corner. What have I missed? I think that's the layout of the show, correct? Did we check off everything?
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's got it.
I think so. I think we got it. We're ready to roll, baby. Yeah. This is how we start.
And how we usually start and how we will always start is with Elliot's headlines.
Okay. He was ready for that one.
National headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
Yes. College basketball, because that's all we got yesterday. Literally all we got. College basketball. Xavier. How about the Musketeers? Xavier, they get a win over Butler, 76-63. Zach Fremantle, Conwell each had 14 points to lead the charge. McKnight and Swain both had 13 points. Xavier had 14 steals in the game. Butler, 20 turnovers. 14 steals by the Muskies. 6 of those were by Dalen Swain. I mean, there was rumblings of a quadruple-double for Dalen Swain yesterday. Up next for the Muskies is Seton Hall Sunday at 2 o'clock. UCLA, they lost at home last night as 10-point favorites to Minnesota, 64-61. Fifth-ranked Houston, they took down Arizona State on the road, 80-65. 16th-ranked Marquette, they got a blowout win over Seton Hall, 80-56. 23rd-ranked, this is a good one, 23rd-ranked Kansas had their worst loss in program history as a ranked team playing an unranked team. It was their worst loss in the 22-year Bill Self era. Wow. BYU 91, Kansas 57. 91-57.
They were supposed to be really good this year. Preseason, either number 1 or 2, and they were, returning most of their starters. When Bill Self does that, they're usually a championship contender. Yeah, I'm shocked they're as bad as they are. With the transfers they got, I guess they're ranked 23rd and just lost a game. They can't be that bad, but, certainly not what expectations were.
And I think Hunter might be a fraud. Is he a fraud?
He's been a fraud. We've known that.
Yeah, I think he's a fraud. Going down the list here,
it was a big get. When they landed him 2 years ago, I was like, man, that was a huge get. We talk about NIL and some of the stuff on how it could help college basketball, help players like that at one point had an NBA projection. For a guy like that to come back, then to go to a program like Kansas, I was like, man, and the rankings reflected that too, because they've been ranked at the top of the last 2 years coming into each season. And of course, being headlined by him, Hunter Dickinson has not been the player that they've anticipated him being, and at least hasn't had the impact that they've anticipated him having. But Kansas has underperformed the last 2 years compared to expectations coming in. Kind of a weird thing, especially for a coach like Bill Self.
That's right. 11th ranked Wisconsin. They pull away in the second half to beat Illinois by 21 points there. TCU, they upset 9th ranked Texas Tech 69-66 at home. 2nd ranked Florida, they won by 22 against Oklahoma. And 13th ranked Purdue lost on the road to 14th ranked Michigan. Those are your headlines. I guess college basketball headlines.
One more headline. Our old friend got a new job.
Who?
Domata Peko got hired by Deion Sanders as the next defensive line coach of the Colorado Buffalo. So Warren Sapp was offered the role, allegedly, and Sapp said he didn't want to take a full-time off-season role, going to remain in his role as a defensive special assistant, just coach in season. Domata Peko going to be the full-time D-line coach for Deion Sanders in the Buffalo.
Yes, how about that?
He did some work with Zimmer in Dallas this year, so working his way up the ranks.
Gotta love Warren Sapp's approach, by the way. Like Deion, hey Warren, you want to come help me coach? Yeah, but not a lot. Just I want to be there on game day. I want to experience the game day experience. I just don't want to put in all the behind the scenes work. So gotta love that work ethic from Warren. I actually was a huge Warren Sapp fan during his playing days. But
what a career for Peko, by the way.
For sure.
15 years in the NFL. I didn't know he was playing in 2020. That's crazy.
Speaking of careers in the NFL, Andy Dalton signed an extension yesterday, a 2-year extension up to $10 million. I think the base was $6 for his extension in Carolina. Brings him up above $115 million in career earnings. So shout out Andy. Carved out a pretty good career for himself.
We were right. Andy Dalton was the truth.
What is it? Isn't it this? Or is it this?
I don't know.
Horned Frogs?
Horn frog down.
Horn Frogs down.
Horn frog down.
Are you surprised it's that team that he went to? Or that he at least committed to a 2-year contract for? Are you surprised that it's the Panthers that he did that with?
No,
I think Bryce is a frail little boy, and he might get snapped and hurt at any given time, so they got to invest in a backup. I think it makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense. You get paid $5 million a year to back up a guy that for the past 2 years can't play in the NFL. So
and you're not going to be playing in January.
Yeah.
So you get a good vacation in the winter.
Vacation.
Yeah. If he's a Pro Bowler, he doesn't have to worry about having to miss that for the Super Bowl. So all positives for Andy.
Oh yeah. Only can build on that legacy.
When he left Cincinnati, what was the first team he went to? Was it Dallas? I know he was with Dallas at some point. He's hopped around a bit.
Chicago for a while.
I think it was Chicago.
I think it was Chicago immediately after Cincinnati.
Okay, and then he went to Dallas.
Bears, then no, it was Cowboys. It was Cowboys. It was Cowboys, Bears, Saints, Panthers.
Interesting.
Yes.
Good for Andy.
Yes.
And a few times he's kept going to try to be a starter somewhere, and every time the rug gets pulled out from underneath him. But I think he's kind of accepted it. All right, I'm not going to go pursue being a starter, but I'm going to go find spots where I know I may not be the starter, but I'm probably going to have my number called at some point. But we'll see. Look, Carolina, if Andy Dalton's your quarterback, it's not like there's a big promise. It's not like a high ceiling, but it is. Look, guy's a solid NFL quarterback. He's not winning you anything major, but he's a guy that can get the job done, and he's a perfect backup quarterback. But if you're relying on Andy Dalton to get you where you need to go, you're not going very far as that goes. But you mentioned college basketball a little bit ago. ESPN's Joe Lunardi continues to put out his bracketology each and every week. Cincinnati has yet to play their way into any of these. We laugh about all the metrics and, the probability, the NCAA tournament at-large probabilities that just remains high for the Bearcats. But on all the bracketology, stuff that comes out, whether it's Joe Lenardi or whoever, Cincinnati, UC is not popping up there despite the metrics showing that they have a very good shot of doing this. So on the bubble right now, if the NCAA tournament, if this was the actual field, the first four would not feature the Cincinnati Bearcats. The first four, which tips off the tournament every year in Dayton at UD Arena, kind of a boring first four field if this was it. But San Diego State, Arkansas, which would feature Calipari, so there's at least that little bit of a rub right there. Wake Forest and Oklahoma. Those would be the first four teams right there as far as that goes. But you do have Xavier as the next four out, along with Indiana, Kansas State, and UC Irvine. Some other big teams that are in the hunt for these final spots, of course, Texas on the bubble, Georgia, VCU, North Carolina. A lot of blue blood programs fighting for a bubble, fighting in the bubble right now. Xavier, though, in the hunt still, in the mix. UC has some work to do still. I don't think that's a surprise to you, Elliot.
No, I listen, and if you would have told me there was even a glimmer of a chance about 3 weeks ago, I would have laughed at your face. So the fact that we're sitting here talking about to be a position to be in position, as Mr. Rothstein likes to say, that's all I can ask for at this point. Tonight is the biggest game of the season, and then every game after that is also the biggest game of the season. So if you lose tonight, I don't think there's really a way you get in as an at-large. I think you'd have to win the conference tournament. Just because West Virginia, it's a quad one game, you're on the road. So if you're able to win this, I think it puts you back on the projection line where there's a vision to go. You go at West Virginia, you play TCU at home, Baylor at home, Houston on the road, fifth-ranked Houston on the road, Kansas State at home, and Oklahoma State on the road. So if you can win 5 of those 6, you're in. And I think it starts tonight. You got to beat West Virginia. West Virginia, I was at the game when they played here in Cincinnati, obviously. That's one of the worst basketball games I've ever attended. UC lost by 13, I think. That game played like a game where UC lost by 25. It was horrible. It was the game, I think, that pretty much started the new run for the Bearcats, because there was no effort, there was no energy, and I think that's what we needed to get through the bubble, as it were. So I think if the Bearcats take care of business down the stretch, they're going to be an at-large team. I still have that hope.
How many games do they have remaining, too?
6.
I know we're wrapping up a couple of weeks, so 6 games. You brought up the West Virginia matchup. And by the way, we never even talked about it coming out of the weekend, of course, but obviously they were on the road at Iowa State. Played that close, obviously, till the end. They pulled away at 81-70 the final. What was your takeaway of the Bearcats' performance? I know we're going to talk Bearcats later this week as well, or tomorrow. But where were you at with how they performed against Iowa State over the weekend?
Yeah, I thought that was one of their better games of the year. I mean, again, I know there's good losses, bad losses, and you can't really there's no moral victories, as everybody likes to say. That's a moral victory. If we lose that game as the second or third conference game we played, that's a game I'm like, all right, this team can play a little. We lost to a really good top 10 team on the road. Nobody goes into Iowa State and wins. So the fact that we were winning that game with about 10 minutes left says a lot. I mean, rebounding is going to be an issue going forward. We don't have big men, and that's what it is. 37 rebounds to 19 in that game. That's the entire game. Free throw shooting's been way better for the Bearcats. I think they shot 80% in that game, 81% in that game. They shot 50% from the floor almost, 40% from 3. They're good. The Bearcats' offense right now is humming. It starts with Jizzle James. Jizzle James has scored seemingly 25 points in each of the last 3 games. So the guy's been unbelievable. It's crazy. All it takes is legitimately somebody on the team to make shots. They did not have that for the first, 6-7 games of conference play. They just didn't have it. Simas Lukosius has been a ghost. Dylan Mitchell's really good, but Dylan Mitchell can't make jump shots, and he certainly can't make free throws. And I think that you needed a Jizzle James, you needed Day-Day to step up and have somebody, one of our guards, step up and score. And that's exactly what's happened. Iowa State, I mean, I didn't expect to win the game, not even close. By the way, an incredible cover if you had UC plus 11.5 in that one. But, yeah, I felt great about it. It wasn't like the Kansas State loss, the first loss of the year. It wasn't like the Arizona loss earlier on. It wasn't like the West Virginia loss. That was a game where the Bearcats played about as good as they could do. No, there's no illusions that this Bearcat team can win a national championship. But they absolutely can compete in the Big 12, and that's what they showed on Saturday.
As a team, shooting 66%. You talked about the free throws. If they ever played Green Bay, Doug Gottlieb, he would not refer to them as the Cincinnati Bearcats. He would just call them the Cincinnati 66%. So, they have to get better at the free throw line to impress old Doug Gottlieb over there. But either way, so here again, the Bearcats, you said it, only 6 games remaining for them. Obviously, they have West Virginia coming up. They're on the road at West Virginia, and then they're coming up later on tonight. But then they're going to have TCU, Baylor. They'll be at Houston, Kansas State at home for their final regular season home game. And then, of course, they'll close out the regular season at Oklahoma State. So, yeah, we're wrapping up the regular season for college basketball over the next couple of weeks. And conference tournaments coming up around the corner. Selection Sunday about 3 weeks away. So we're getting closer to the best postseason tournament out there, at least in my opinion. But,
that's right.
All right, we'll step away for a few. Let's transition over to some baseball talk. MLB Network put out a ranking of their top 10 general managers or president of baseball operations throughout Major League Baseball. Kind of no one really cares about the general managers, director of baseball operations. But when you start, putting a rankings together of the best front office, basically is what you're doing. I have a humongous problem with who they put at number 1. You just have to kind of roll your eyes at it a little bit, because how difficult is this individual's job when you really think about it? We'll get to that when we come back, more off the bench when we return. I always get a kick out of on social media when people say "get crawled." I don't know why. I get a big kick out of that.
It's a little bit of an insult. It's also, it goes
half
both ways.
and half.
It's half and half.
Honestly, up and down sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they got Francona, everyone got thralled right there, right? Like, do we give him credit for that?
Of course.
Yeah. So we got thralled in October. We just wish that getting thralled in October would mean. Or crawled, or whatever his name is, not thralled. Tommy Thrall. Shout out to Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy Thrall. Get Tommy Thrall.
Get thralled.
Poor Tommy. He's taking shots for no damn reason over here because I can't get the names right. But there you go. But no, look, we talk a lot about the Reds front office, and I think what people and I don't even know who this individual is. I guess he was drafted by the Reds many, many decades ago. But we all love Nick Kirby. But there's an individual on social media, I guess, was drafted by the Reds back in the day. He's Pusha C on old X. I'm not really sure what his background. He does not like Chatterbox. I don't know what it is.
We're just naming people, huh? Yeah, I listen. I try to spread love here. That's what we're gonna do today. Can you choose love one time, Justin? Choose love.
Well, hold up. I'm not the one that's not choosing love. I'm defending I get very defensive of our guys here. I go to bat when he attacks you guys or he attacks Kirby. I go to bat. I got in a little back and forth with him not too long ago over something kind of silly, over what we're about to talk about. right now. Like so Pusha C, like I said, I don't really know anything about him. And I'm not really saying anything that's hateful. I'm just pointing it out. He's very critical of the Reds front office. And one thing that him and I got into it about a while back was some of the moves that the Reds have made. And I always said, well, what moves you complain about the moves that the moves that the Reds make, but you never counter with any moves that they should make. Like, what moves did you want the Reds to make? It's always, we just complain about what the Reds do, but we never come back and say, like Jacob, for instance, at least with the Bengals, you're constantly putting out, content in regards to what you want the Bengals to do in the offseason. You don't just sit there and say, well, that's a dumb move. Well, that's a dumb draft pick. You come forth and say, well, I wouldn't have taken him. I would have preferred that they went out and got this guy because of fill in the blank. That's whatever. Not everybody does that. He definitely doesn't do it. So I kept asking him, okay, you don't like the moves that the Reds made. I actually don't mind the moves that the Reds have made. What moves would you have made? Well, he starts ripping Nick Krall because of the fact that he didn't spend a lot of money. And I think we keep confusing ownership with general managers. It's not Nick Krall's money that he's outspending. He is given a budget, and he has to go execute offseason moves based on the budget that is given to him by the cheap owners. And I think we all forget that. We rip the general manager for moves that they make that they're put in a bind based on the restrictions that are put on them by ownership. So that drives me nuts. I have no clue. If you ask me on a scale of 1 to 10 how good of a general manager Nick Krall is, and technically Nick Krall is the director of baseball operations and Brad Meter is the general manager, but these rankings that we're about to look at, they've combined them. It's one or the other, and I don't really know who has more say than the other. It's kind of strange, but either way, they both get credit or both get criticized when things don't go well. But if you ask me my thoughts on how good or bad the Reds general manager / director of baseball operations is, I would have to I'm going to kind of live in the middle because I don't think that they're bad, and the results have to be there for me to say that they're good. But at the same time, the reason we're pissed off about the Reds over the last 2 years is because expectations. And how do you get expectations? You have expectations because you have talent. And I'd say if this team has talent, it's because of the job that the general manager and director of baseball operations has done. So I'm always so in between on how to evaluate the personnel that the Reds have in that front office, because I think it all comes down to the restrictions that they have to operate within due to the lack of funds that are provided to them by the front office. And I think that that's what's hard to truly evaluate who the top general managers are in a sport where there is no rules as far as restrictions, equal restrictions across the board on the amount of money all these teams can spend. So this list comes out, MLB Network put out and ranked their top 10 general managers / director of baseball operations. And here's the rankings that came out. Right there at the top, Andrew Friedman. He is the general manager, of course, for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And let's just stop the rankings right there. At this point, is he actually a good general manager? I'm not throwing shade his way, but I am curious. I think Elliot could be the general manager for the Los Angeles Dodgers with the budget that they have. Do you think that Andrew Friedman should get credit for landing Shohei Ohtani? I don't think so. Do you think that Andrew Friedman was sitting there saying, hey, there's this guy named Shohei Ohtani. No one's paying attention to him. They don't even have an eye on him. He's this diamond in the rough. We see something in him that nobody else does. No. He went after the biggest star and offered him the most money because he had the most money to offer him because of ownership. It's not like he's a better salesman than everybody else. It's not like Friedman convinced him to go to some small market team over the big markets because he's just a great salesman. I'm sorry, I just want to disqualify him from general manager being the best general manager in baseball. If the Reds got Andrew Friedman to come be their general manager, do you think that the Reds are getting Shohei Ohtani? Do you think that they're lining? Yeah, they're probably not. They're probably not lining up to get Vlad Guerrero Jr. or any big name free agent that's out there. Do you think that if their general manager, if Friedman was the Reds general manager, do you think that in 3 or 4 years here that would increase the chances of the Reds keeping Elly De La Cruz? I do not. And I know what's going to happen if the Reds ultimately do lose Elly De La Cruz, and we all kind of feel like that's going to be the case. Is that going to be on Nick Krall? Is that going to be on Brad Meter? Is that going to be on the Reds front office personnel who have really no control over this situation based on the restrictions that are put on them? I'm just saying, I don't want to be disrespectful to Friedman and say he's not a good general manager. I'm just saying it's kind of silly to put him as number one because he literally is playing a game that nobody else is playing because he has unlimited funds. I don't know if the Reds have a good or a bad general manager, but any time that Brad Meter or Nick Krall are able to do anything of significance, I'm more impressed with that than the Dodgers landing Shohei Ohtani or a Mookie Betts or insert big name free agent / trade target here. I don't know. I just had a problem seeing Friedman at the top. There's a reason that when we talked about the most improved teams in baseball this year, everyone kept saying the Reds are the most improved. But we're looking at what the Dodgers have done, and they improved so much that we disqualify them. All the list, you have literally ESPN Buster Olney saying, well, the Reds are the most improved because we couldn't count the Dodgers because that's how far ahead they got over everybody else. Like, it's just not even fair, the game that they're playing compared to everybody else. I rambled a lot. I apologize, but I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Is it silly seeing the Dodgers general manager there? No disrespect to him, but how hard is his job? I don't think he goes to any other club and makes them better the way he made the Dodgers better. I just think they have the funds to go get the best players in the world.
He has 29 AAA teams. He just waits until he sees who's good and then offers them more money than everyone else. We were talking about it yesterday. Gavin Lux was the number 2 prospect in all of baseball. He was the number 1 prospect for the Dodgers. He played, 130 games for him last year, and they just shipped him off for nothing?
Yeah.
And Kirby's not going to like that I said for nothing.
He's not going to like that one bit.
I'm just saying, they just go pick the great players off other teams, and while that's great, and I think he does deserve, a round of applause and his flowers for, convincing superstars across the league to take a lesser role, that does mean something. I gave Pat Riley a bunch of credit when he recruited LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh to Miami, convincing those superstars to take less of a role on a championship team. That means something, but I wouldn't have him ranked number 1. I think he has the easiest job in sports, as you said, with the pool of money he's able to work with every offseason. And everyone focuses on free agency signings and trades, but international scouting and drafting and prospects and getting them through the organization and to your major league club is another side of being a GM and being a really good GM. And I mean, obviously they've had good enough prospects to move for some great players, but we haven't seen a homegrown Dodgers team really in this era, especially not talking about right now ranking this GM as number 1. So I think his ability to go pick stars off the other 29 teams is great and certainly allows the Dodgers to compete for a World Series year in and year out, but I don't think that makes him the best general manager in baseball.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm impressed with his work, given the fact that he can do literally whatever he wants. He literally plays a video game with real life situations. Yeah. I think that let me say this, you can't take away anything from him. Like, you can't say that he's bad at his job. Right. Because given the fact that he has the power of God, he has been able to act like such, right? He does get the best possible player available. So I'm not going to take away from the fact that I'm sure he's a fine GM. It's just, are we grading who has the most money, or are we grading who's the best at their job? Because I think that's what probably this list should have been, most likely, as you look down that list there. I imagine a lot of them have to do with big markets.
So again, you look at the job that Brad Meter and Nick Krall have done. I know they're easy punching bags. I mean, they got beat up a lot last year, but I said, look, the only reason everyone's disappointed in the Reds last year is because of the good job technically that they did, right? Like, you look at the players that first of all, the trades that they made when they hit the reset button, that they were able to go out. I mean, when they moved on from Luis Castillo and they moved on from obviously Eugenio Suarez and some of those names, and obviously, Gray and those guys, at the time we didn't trust them to make the quality trades that they did because of how bad they messed up the last rebuild in the early 2010s. But if you look at the job that they did there, getting the pieces that they did moving on from those individuals, you look at how the organization has developed the players coming up through the system, when they've called them up, how they've produced. The fact that this team is pretty much homegrown in a lot of the major positions that are out there, especially that rotation. Brady Singer is a complementary piece, but I mean, you look at Nick Lodolo, you look at Hunter Greene, you look at Rhett Lauder, you look at obviously Andrew Abbott, who we're going to talk about more coming up in a bit. These are all homegrown Reds guys that they've drafted or traded for and developed and all this. That's all from Brad Meter and Nick Krall. I cannot sit here and comfortably say that they are a bad duo. I think that they have done a very good job for the Cincinnati Reds. The whole reason that we have the confidence, or at least have the expectations for this team to succeed that we do, is because of the quality of players that they've brought in. And they went out and they got Terry Francona. I think that the Reds front office group is being overlooked slightly. But I do understand, because eventually we could talk about the quality of players that they've acquired. If it's not leading to wins on the field, that's really what it all comes down to. But I do believe if the Reds have a 85 to 90 win season coming up, I am curious the perception of the Reds front office a year from now when we're having this conversation a month before opening day.
If the Reds have an 85-90 win season this year, it's because of Elliot and McLean and Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo and Tyler Stevenson. It's because of guys that came up through this organization. It's not because of, obviously it would require Jamer to play great and, Jake Fraley to have a better season in the outfield. But the guys that propel this team to where we want to get to are the guys that have been here the whole time. And I think that's a big part of it, and why I've always said I think Nick Krall has done a good job in Cincinnati. We're not going to get the Juan Sotos, the top free agents to come here. That's never in the cards. So the fact that he built a farm system with a core that we called up 2 years ago, that we feel like we have some superstars littered in our lineup at some point down the road. Ellie, McLean, a lot of people love Spencer Steer. What could CES be? Like, these pieces are exciting. This isn't stuff that normally happens to Cincinnati. So the fact that Nick Krall was able to get all these pieces together on the same timeline, get them all up here, and have an exciting core for this city and this team, I think it shouldn't be overlooked just because you're not happy about, one or two free agency signings.
Yeah.
I
would also like to add too, like Nick Krall, if I remember correctly, and I remember a decent amount of his trades. The one trade that I objectively hated and I thought was terrible was the one for Mike Minor, where the Reds had to pay him $10 million or $11 million, and they let go of Wade Miley, I think, for less money. That was the only trade I really didn't like. They traded Amir Garrett for Mike Minor. I thought that was a terrible trade. That seemed like a trade the front office wanted to do, and not Nick Krall, but nonetheless, Nick Krall's name is attached to it. Outside of that, I know I saw this one yesterday. It was the Luis Castillo trade.
Yeah.
So since joining Seattle, Luis Castillo has the third lowest ERA among all qualified AL starters. Noelvi Marte, a minus 1.5 F4 in 2024. Edwin Arroyo hasn't played since 2023. Andrew Moore, a 4.47 in AA. Levi Stout, DFA'd. So those were the returns there, and I saw a lot of people criticizing that trade. I would say it's a little early to be judging that one.
Nick Kirby pointed it out, but we have to remember that there was only, 1 year of Castillo left?
Yeah.
And he signed a massive extension with Seattle that he more than likely, at least when we traded him, the thought was he wasn't going to sign that here.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't even still be with the Reds in this hypothetical world that they don't make that trade. So, and what's the team control on Arroyo and Noelvi Marte? I mean, we're talking about a decade between the two. So, yeah, definitely too early.
Yeah, to grade that, the result of that trade still to be determined. Now, I've also saw some more arguments in there that were like, well, it was dumb of them to even move on from Luis Castillo to begin with. But let's be clear. From a talent perspective, imagine what this rotation would look like with Luis Castillo and Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo at the top. It'd be ridiculous, right? But also, we also can't ignore the fact that 2 years ago we talked about, man, I can't believe how quickly these guys have been called up and how quickly they've made an impact. The reason that that's such a surprise is because that doesn't happen. What the Reds have experienced the last couple of years, even though they haven't experienced anything, they haven't technically got to the playoffs, they haven't technically won anything, they have moved up the timeline of expectations. Like, the Reds are ahead of schedule. I know nobody wants to hear that. You want a winner now, but usually teams who lose 100 games, they were expected to lose 100 games 2 years ago. It was supposed to be one of the worst seasons ever. Ended up being one of the more exciting seasons that we can remember just because of the youth movement that kind of took over. The timeline got moved up a bit. This team was supposed to be pretty bad for quite a few more years. So paying Luis Castillo at that time, although it would have been nice to have him here, I don't think we were anticipating that 2 years later we'd be having these expectations of this team competing to win the division and having a Terry Francona and having an MVP candidate in Elliot De La Cruz and having a Cy Young caliber pitcher in Hunter Greene. All of this stuff really started clicking pretty quickly, and that's elevated the expectations ahead of schedule, if you will. That's not an excuse for this team if they don't succeed, but the timeline has been moved up, I think, a lot quicker than what even we had anticipated when this rebuild started initially. So.
Yeah, 2023 was so far above any kind of expectation that, I think it kind of warped fans' minds about what it was supposed to be. We thought none of those guys were going to lose any steam. It was just going to keep going up and to the right for all of eternity, and obviously that wasn't what happened last year. But if they can get back on track, who's to say we can't, pick up right where you left off this year? That's the thing about having the exciting young core that we have is you never know what the ceiling is because they could just keep getting better.
All right, this is Off the Bench. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here on 1410 ESPN Radio and Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Let's continue talking Reds. We have a couple clips we want to get to. Terry Francona addressing the media and just, everything. You listen to him talk baseball for hours. And he's going to be a walking soundbite throughout the entire season. Also, speaking of expectations are high because of the pitching and because of the talent that's on this roster, but health has to come along with that. A talking point that we've had for a while. We talked about the scare of Rhett Lauder the other day, but now we're hearing something right now about Andrew Abbott that has me a little concerned. We'll talk about all that and more when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Sam LeCure took some time and hung out with us yesterday, and of course, he made a very interesting comment regarding the impact of Terry Francona. Basically, wins above replacement, that Terry Francona will have the biggest impact on the Cincinnati Reds, more so than any other player that made a change this previous offseason. He said have a bigger impact on the Reds than what we'll see from Juan Soto on his new team. And that was a clip that made the rounds yesterday after the show, and rightfully so. It definitely got people's attention, and we know the significance of the impact of what we are hoping Terry Francona brings to the table. And I think we could already feel just a different vibe and just the way the team's responding, the way the media and fans are responding. There is a heightened, optimism because of the addition of Terry Francona, no doubt about it. But when the players are asked about it, there was obviously last year, Hunter Greene, finished 8th in Cy Young voting, of course. He had a lot to say about the responsibility that not Terry Francona has on this season, but the players. Take a listen.
I do want to make it clear that Terry's a human being, and the expectation of, Terry Francona's here, we're going to get a World Series, we're going to go to the playoffs. We need to do our job as players. The managers can only do so much. I think there's been maybe too much of an expectation on him, whether it's through media, through fans, on him putting us in that position. Obviously, he's a fantastic manager. We all trust him and believe him, but we need to go do our part, and that's what every city wants. They want that excitement. They want that life back into the city, especially since the last time we've been in the playoffs. So the city deserves it. The fans deserve it. And we're just trying to give it to them as much as we can.
Thank you to WLW TV as well, by the way, just citing them for the usage of that clip here on the show today. I kind of like that. I agree. Tito's not that great. Tito stinks. Man, is there drama in the clubhouse? Did you guys hear that? Hunter Greene is not a fan of Francona. No, there's multiple ways to dissect this, and none of them are bad. What I heard was, I think him and David Bell were actually close. If you go read some of the comments he made after David Bell's departure, it's not that he wasn't pleased. It's that, he was a David Bell guy. I think some of this is kind of defending David Bell to a certain extent too, saying, hey, there's a lot of expectations, but at the end of the day, it does come back to what we do. I don't think it matters who the manager is. At some point, it does come down to the guys on the field. And I kind of like that accountability that he's kind of taking as one of the star players on this team, saying, hey, we love having Terry Francona here. I think he liked David Bell. I think what he's doing is saying, hey, it doesn't matter who the manager is. If we don't do our part, we're not going to accomplish anything anyways, no matter who's leading this organization and club at this point. There's one of my favorite sound bites from spring training thus far. I just thought there was a lot of leadership and accountability in that, saying, hey, be excited about Terry Francona, but at the end of the day, it's up to us for us to go accomplish what we're setting our goals out for this upcoming season. I love that sound bite from Hunter Greene.
Yeah, and I think that's where people kind of, I don't know if they don't understand it or if they go out of their way not to understand it, but it starts with the players. That's who it starts with. It doesn't start with Terry Francona. It starts with the players, and you have to have guys that play up to their level, that play up to the caliber that we all think they can. And if guys like Hunter Greene are going to be there and they're going to outperform his expectation, you have Ellie and Matt and everybody who and CES and all these guys who are going to come out there and ball like we all think they can. Then I keep saying David Bell, man. Then Terry Francona's job is just going to be a lot easier, and that's when you start. Now it can be Terry Francona is responsible for helping, bring them up and develop a skill and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like if your players don't play good, you're not going to have a team, and that's what Hunter Greene's saying there.
And that's what we want, right?
Yeah.
What we've talked about all year, last year and really ad nauseum was who on this roster of these young guys in the core are going to take that next step as leaders, be
Correct.
the vocal guys in the locker room. That was, I made fun of it a lot, but it's a big reason why Jonathan India was a huge piece of this team, is he was that vocal leader in the locker room. It seems like Hunter Greene's really pushing himself into that role, and I think it's one that's open for him. Everyone would obviously listen to what he has to say. He's proven himself on the field, and I think if he wants to, really seize that, that's how he's going to take the next step as a pitcher. We saw him as a Cy Young finalist last year. He's one of the best pitchers in the National League, one of the best pitchers in baseball, certainly one of the best young arms, and who knows where he can get to. And I think if he's going to be a true leader of the pitching on this club and of really the whole team, that's going to be a huge, huge win for the Reds, an addition of someone who's, already on the team.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's the leadership being displayed by him as one of the best players on the team too. And that's no shot at Jonathan India. Like leadership is leadership. Don't get me wrong, but I think it means more and it carries more weight when you're one of the stars of the team. And Jonathan India was, I think, rookie of the year, obviously, and had a lot of up and down seasons after that. And I don't think ever fulfilled the trajectory that we anticipated for him, especially coming after winning rookie of the year right off the bat. Showed a lot of promise. I don't think he ever took that next major step. Was a very good player, but I don't think he was an elite player. Hunter Greene's an elite pitcher in Major League Baseball right now. So to have one of your elite players, taking that leadership accountability role the way he did with that clip right there, I think that's going to go a long way, and I think that's going to carry a lot of weight in that clubhouse. No doubt about it. But it is interesting because players, they're not robots. They're hearing everything too. They're hearing it too. What could be some other motivating factors for him saying that, do you believe? Could it be, is he saying, hold on, let's slow down, pump the brakes? Like, we're not a World Series caliber team. We're not this type of team. Like, what could be some of the other motivating factors behind that comment, by the way? Because I thought it wasn't a bad one by any means. I don't think there's any, negativity behind it whatsoever. But what do you think some of the other motivating factors behind it could be outside of what he just said?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of pressure being put right now, and that's from the fan base, that's from the media. I think that's from a lot of people out there that are putting everything on Terry Francona. It's a lot of pressure, right? You carry the weight of a city, of a franchise on your shoulders, a city that's more desperate, I'd argue, than any city with the professional sports team in this country. And you come in and you're like, all right, Terry, fix every single issue we have, please, and do it quickly in your 3 to 4 years with the Reds. Please do it right now. And I think a lot of it is, the players are like, all right, we hear all that noise. We hear it too. I'm not going to sit here and let Terry Francona take the fall for everything. Whether or not they play well this year, that's going to be, again, on the players. Like, it's not everything is a Terry Francona problem. And that's part of the issue with, like, I don't know what the mindset of the fans or whatever. I know we didn't like David Bell. I understand that. I got the point. He wasn't a great manager. Didn't have a lot of success. But in the same token, Nick Kroll didn't have a lot of success. He's still here. The Castellinis didn't have any success. Can't fire themselves. But it's like there's a lot of people that haven't had success over the past 25 years. It's not all because of the manager. I'll say that. And I think the players want to get ahead of it and say, you know what, we're going to take accountability too. Don't just put this all on our coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's hearing what everyone's saying. And I mean, Sam LeCure kind of started by saying what we were saying, what Hunter's saying, and then he deviated yesterday and said Terry Francona is a 10-win player.
Yeah.
So kind of played both sides of it. But I think that's, kind of just where optimism lies in Cincinnati. We were holding our breath after the Terry Francona hire for the big outfield signing, and it never came. So the signing to be most excited about as we near, opening day is the addition of Terry Francona. So I think, fans are going to try to talk themselves into whatever they can. The easiest way to get them to a playoff team, and I think with that right now with the Reds, is Terry Francona's a 10-win player. So I think that's where everyone's just kind of defaulting to, and hope they're right. But Hunter Greene and a lot of the players continue to emphasize that it does come down to the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. The guys on the field actually have to deliver what they're coached to do and have to play at a high level. Otherwise, it doesn't matter who's coaching the team.
You caught that yesterday too. I was confused on that, and I meant to follow up with that, and then I got distracted by the Francona comment to end it, because at first he said any success that they have, he should not get credit for, and then at the very end said, but he's going to be why they have all the success too. I meant to ask the follow up on that, but I'm glad you caught that, because I caught that as well yesterday. That, and he flipped Elliot off. I thought that was great.
That was really fun.
He did. I think he was playing both sides, because I think that because I brought up the question I asked was, we blamed David Bell last year. Are we going to credit Terry Francona if they win this year? Is it going to be the same type of deal? And I think he was trying to allude that it's a little bit of a different deal, because you're bringing in Terry Francona, who's a proven winner, World Series champion, and he's going to have success with the Reds. I firmly believe that. We all believe that. Everybody believes it. And when that happens, you have to at least think about crediting the guy that got us all excited for the Reds again. Ellie did that 2 years ago. It's Terry Francona this year. So, I think that Sam was just trying to be like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, David Bell, I don't think he got as much hate I don't think he got as much credit as he probably deserved. And it's also Terry Francona is a really good manager, and he's going to be a game changer for the Reds this season.
So last month, when we all got to go to the media day over at Great American Ballpark, they were Phil Castellini had kind of stood up and was kind of letting us all know about some of the cool features that were going to be on display this upcoming season at Great American Ballpark. Karen Forgas as well, she had kind of let it be known some of the promotional items or some of the promotional games that'll be, heavily featured throughout the season. Of course, we talked about the bobblehead giveaways and some of those, but one of the cool features on May 14th is going to be, of course, Pete Rose Day at Great American Ballpark, and there's going to be a patch on the jerseys for Pete Rose throughout the season as well, which is really cool. But Terry Francona was also asked about this as well while at spring training yesterday. Here's what he had to say about the patch, about Pete Rose, and how they're going to honor him this upcoming year.
I will wear that proudly as you can. Anybody that played with Pete, you're not going to find a better teammate. And again, he was probably 20 years older than me. He treated us young kids like gold. I mean, we hung on him so much that, he's a pro's pro. And then I got the honor of playing for him. It killed me because I played so bad. I hit so bad that I felt like I let him down, and it bothered me. It's like I got amnesia and forgot how to hit, but I love the guy. And I tell people this all the time, I have no ability to not be biased when it comes to Pete. I know there's some things that happen. I can't be I love the guy.
I don't know if you guys heard that. I didn't hear anything. I'm assuming our listeners did, so I just let it play through. I'm assuming everyone heard it. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't get it on my end, but I'll let you guys No. You're totally fine. As long as the viewers and you guys caught it, I'll let you guys kind of react to it. But that was Terry Francona again, just talking about obviously, his friendship and relationship and just the way he, his time with Pete Rose throughout. But just to, I'll let you guys kind of react to what he had to say there.
I think that this season is going to be a couple of things. I know it's the 50th anniversary of the Big Red Machine this year too. Yep. So you have that. You have the Pete Rose. You have Terry Francona coming to town. I think that Terry Francona and the Reds, the core, I think they're going to try to honor what the Reds were all those years ago, and that was a large part of who Pete Rose was. Pete Rose was a winner, and he helped the Reds win a lot. And I think that when you lose somebody like that, it's going to inspire a team, and I think that's what David Bell was trying to say. He's going to make David Bell and those teams of the past proud.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the sentiment of most people around, at least the Reds and in Cincinnati, is that they love Pete Rose. And that's what Terry Francona is saying, is we're going to use, this year and this patch as a moment to, honor Pete and everything he did for the Reds and for the city. And that's what this year is about, and what wearing that patch is about, is just, shining a light on who he was as a ball player and who he was for this city and how much he meant to, everyone here.
All right, off the bench right here on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410, Wing AM in Dayton. Last thing here on the Reds, mentioned it a little bit ago. One thing that kind of caught my attention, of course, last week, pitchers and catchers reported, and we said anything that comes out of pitchers and catchers reporting is usually bad because it's usually something health-related, right? And then very first day, Rhett Lauder experienced a little soreness in his elbow. Seems like, he resumed his throwing program earlier in the week, and everything seems fine right now. But another pitcher to kind of keep an eye on, it sounds like, is Andrew Abbott, who is still slightly recovering from that shoulder, injury last season. And it's another thing to keep an eye on throughout this training or throughout this spring training as well, is that he's just going to be taking it slow as he kind of hits the ground running as well. And so this is why when we brought up, or at least when I had thrown out, the Rhett Lauder thing, is it a big deal? Not a big deal. Will he even be in the rotation on opening day? This, that, and the other. The bottom line is they don't have a big margin. Their margin for error is so slim. So any injury seems, or at least a hint of being steady in how they're kind of approaching coming off of these injuries. If they're down one guy, it is a big deal, because having Rhett Lauder, if he starts in AAA to start the season, that's not a horrible thing. That's a good thing. That means that full rotation is healthy. But if you start getting multiple names that we're keeping an eye on as far as being restricted or the kind of taking it slow throughout, it's nothing to panic about, but something to keep an eye on. Where are you at with this Andrew Abbott report that came out yesterday? It's nothing major, but again, we always panic. I panicked. It's always just something to kind of keep an eye on nonetheless.
Yeah, never great to have injuries to arms, but that's why you keep a guy like Nick Martinez around and you draft 2 pitchers in the first round the last 2 years, because depth's important. But we're going to step away, take a quick break, and then we'll be right back in just a minute here off the bench on 1410 Wing AM.
This segment of Off the Bench presented by Poopery. We are off and rolling here on a Wednesday. But nonetheless, Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Jacob in the producer chair today. He's a man of many hats. Casey has other job responsibilities today. Wink, wink. I still think he's hungover, celebrating his birthday last night. But we'll pretend he's out working hard. He always is, actually, so let's be clear. But no, we welcome you back. I want to pick up briefly with the Andrew Abbott conversation just because there was some of the quotes in this article, again. Mark Sheldon had a chance to catch up with Andrew Abbott at spring training, of course. Andrew Abbott, of course, who's kind of taking it lightly. He's just doing a couple bullpen sessions right now. He will not face any live batters for a little bit, so that caught my attention as well. But Andrew Abbott says we're not that far off. He told MLB.com's Mark Sheldon, normal off seasons. It's been a normal off season, but here's where I got concerned. He goes, a few hiccups every now and then. I was in contact with them. I told them coming in that it was probably smart to go slower to make sure that we take care of the problem before it becomes an actual problem. They agreed. They're building it out to what we both believe will be beneficial for us and for them. Terry Francona says, you're going to see him a little later than the other guys because we need to take care of him. We think we can nip something in the bud rather than not do it appropriately. We just want to give him a base where he can go out and log innings. I'm here to tell you, I'm not trying to panic or anything. I just don't like the sounds of that. I don't think that's good. I was
gonna ask Sam this yesterday, and I didn't because he was in an airport and he was rushing to his gate. But the injury plague with pitchers in today's game is very strange. And I'm not saying it's strange like I'm shocked it's happening. Guys are throwing harder than ever. They're using more spin than ever. They're pitching now faster than ever with the pitch clock. Like, I'm not surprised that there are injuries. But at the end of the day, when you have Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, and you look at our rotation specifically, there's been a lot of issues, a lot. And I think that's a league-wide thing. Jacob deGrom, one of the best pitchers in baseball. I don't think he's played more than 15 games in 5 years. I don't know when the last time he threw 15 games in a season, right? I think Kershaw's been dealing with it. I know those are older guys, but, you look around the league, guys who throw like our guys, and for the last couple of years, we're responsible for the success of the team. There's going to be injuries involved. Andrew Abbott is a guy that for the past couple of years now, when he's there at the beginning of the year, he's fantastic. He's great. When you get towards the end of the year and you start overworking that arm, that's when you start to lose it a little bit. And for me, that's always been my biggest thing with him. If I were Terry Francona and the Reds, I'd take it as slow as possible with Andrew Abbott. If he's not ready by opening day, he's not ready by opening day. And we'll find somebody who is. And Andrew Abbott takes his time, and he comes back to this rotation ready to go. And hopefully that gives him the longevity we need him to have for this season, right? I'm not going to be shocked if Graham Ashcraft were to somehow make a guest start, right, for the Cincinnati Reds this year. Would it be on the one of the first starts of the season? Maybe. I'm not going to rule it out. That's a guy we haven't talked about at all, Graham Ashcraft. And it's you move down the line, Rhett Lauder and Nick Martinez and all these guys. They're all there. We have so much starting pitching depth. Chase Petty's another name. You have Lyon Richardson's thrown innings. So many names that the Reds have had over the past few years that are ready to go, and they're there because they know this is a situation. They know that the starting pitching injury plague that's occurred in Major League Baseball is there, and that's why when you talk about good GMs, that's where Nick Krall has done, in my opinion, probably the best job, is that we are not short in starting pitchers. We are not. We have as many starting pitchers as we need to go forward. If Andrew Abbott isn't ready to start the year, he's not ready. We have somebody who is, and hopefully that gives Andrew Abbott the rest of the whole spring as long as he needs to be ready.
The main concern for me with all of this isn't even about opening day or the first month of the season. It's Andrew Abbott's concern his entire career has been that he hits a wall at the end of the season. Now, if he's already dealing with the ramifications of that wear and tear from last year before he even starts this year, does that wall just keep moving up earlier and earlier into the season as he keeps, getting longer and longer into his career? Are these injuries lingering with him from seasons past going to be a thing we have to deal with a lot?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have basically as much of a worry about Andrew Abbott as I do about Nick Lodolo in terms of obviously Lodolo's missed more time with the injuries, but Abbott just hasn't even been close to the same pitcher in the back half of the last 2 seasons. So I really hope that it's nothing. I hope they can work through him, all these injuries and get him back into the rotation. But we talked about it earlier this week too. There's been a lot of people posting projected lineups and rotations for the Reds this year, and a lot of them don't have Andrew Abbott in them. A lot more than I ever expected. So I don't know if it's smoke or fire, Kenner was saying before the show, but there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke with the Andrew Abbott not being in the Reds rotation. I don't know necessarily where that came from, but it's certainly picking up pre any injury news over the last month or so.
Yeah, I don't know where this rotation's going at this point. I know we have Hunter Greene. I know we have Nick Lodolo. I know we have help me out, Brady Singer. Mm-hmm. That's like those are the 3 I know for sure. Nick Martinez, we assume, because he's getting paid $21 million, that he's going to start. We assume Andrew Abbott, who's been a key piece of the Reds starting 5 the past several years, is going to have that spot. But I don't know. I don't know what Terry. This is where a guy like Terry Francona comes in and changes things up to his liking. Maybe he doesn't think Andrew Abbott is going to be in the starting 5 that we don't know about. I'm not sure. Maybe he thinks Graham Ashcraft's better. Maybe he thinks some of these guys are able to take that 5th spot. Maybe they're going to go a 6-man rotation, 4-man rotation. I don't know what he's going to do. But it is interesting to see what the plan will be, because I think there are questions regarding that heading into this season. We have the talent. I firmly believe we have the pitching talent. It's just, how is Terry Francona going to utilize that?
What is your opinion on the potential 6-man rotation?
I'm okay with a 6-man rotation. I mean,
I think I would be too.
It would depend on who the 6th man is. And
right.
Like if it's going to be,
if it turns out to be Nick Martinez,
yeah,
I'm in.
I'm all the way in. I think that's fantastic. If it's Graham Ashcraft, I'm a little bit more weary, but
right.
I would love Rhett Lauder to be a part of the rotation in some capacity. I have to see what he does during the spring, but he was good last year when he was up. So a 6-man rotation, I think, benefits the Reds. It keeps everybody healthy. It keeps everybody fresh. You don't need to rush. And the big issue I know with Hunter Greene heading into last year, I think he shut down the haters in this one, but you had to go long into games, right?
Yeah.
A start's not going to work out if you're going 3.5 innings and you give up 100 pitches and 4 runs, right? Does nobody any good. So going forward, if you have to do 6 guys and they go only 5 in a third inning, fine by me. You know what? I don't care about a quality start. I don't care about that stat one bit. Just get me enough to where our bullpen isn't taxed and we're able to at least give the offense a chance to do their job.
Yep. So again, we'll be keeping an eye on the updates of, again, in these isolated situations, this isn't a big deal, right? The Rhett Lauder news, it wasn't a big deal. It was just something to keep an eye on. But now we're starting to stack some things now. Like now we're keeping an eye on Rhett Lauder and keeping an eye on Andrew Abbott. And, are those any of your ace pitchers? No, but those strong arms in the back of the rotation are vital for this team to do what they need to do as far as living up to expectations this coming season, of course. And look, I think that's why, the fact that the Reds, when they went out and, the Taylor Rogers deal is still one of the more underrated moves that the Reds have made this offseason, because we talked so much about, the outfield and the middle infield and just some of the depth pieces that I don't think we realized just how good of a get that was for the Reds to go get a strong, arm in that bullpen. And it's one of those where it's going to be tough for the Reds to afford to go get a big-time quality starting pitcher. So that's why you put that extra push into the bullpen when they probably knew. I think the Reds have known for a while that there was going to be a little shakiness with Andrew Abbott and Rhett Lauder when it was all said and done coming in. Remember last year, I still think the Reds knew about Noelvi Marte well before we knew, right? I'm adamant, because we all were scratching our heads saying, why are they going balls to the wall with this middle infield? Why do they keep adding middle infielders? Like we were talking last year about them moving on from Jonathan India. They didn't move on from Jonathan India. They just kept adding more middle infielders. And we're like, what are they doing? This doesn't make sense. I think it all made sense when we found out about Noelvi Marte, that's the one reason that they were starting to make the moves that they were with some of the guys there. So I think that the Reds were letting us know early too that they were just being cautious with some of these arms. I'm more worried about, obviously, Andrew Abbott than Rhett Lauder at this point. But I do know that if both of those guys aren't ready to go at the beginning of the season, it's not like the season's over, but it's like you just don't want to head into the season with that kind of negative mojo. Hopefully this is something we're not spending too much time on as we get closer to the season. But you brought up, I like what you brought up a little bit ago about, the 6-man rotation. I'm a fan of it with this roster. Even if everyone's healthy, I'm a fan of it to even start the season. I would try to, the first month and a half, 2 months, have that 6-man rotation just to kind of ease the arms a bit, and then shrink it to a 5-man rotation as the season goes on, and you've got more innings underneath those arms, and everyone's comfortable and ready to rock. But how he manages, Terry Francona, how he manages the rotation and the bullpen, that's going to be the secret sauce right there, and we'll find out just how vital that is.
Pitchers usually start slow anyway. Like, these guys are going to be throwing 110 pitches on their first couple of starts. It takes time to warm up into the season. I don't think it hurts to have a 6-man rotation to start. If anything, I think it gives us the best chance to be as healthy as we can down the stretch.
Well, do you remember, Jake? I think it was a show you and I just did. I think the guys were out. It was around the holidays. It was the Reds Hot Stove League show, and again, it was Derek Johnson, and it was Terry Francona, but he was talking about with Derek Johnson. Derek Johnson wanted to be aggressive this spring training with having guys get to 100 pitches in an outing. So, Elliot, I agree with you. That's usually how this goes, but I am wondering if they're going to dial that back now a little bit, that you already have a couple arms that you're keeping an eye on. Are you going to be cautious now with the Hunter Greenes and Nick Lodolos and other arms during spring training? So,
I said I wish they were cautious pre-injury. I really hope they're cautious now.
But, in December, I'm like, I love it. Yeah. Aggressive. This is what it's all about. But now that it's here, now that we can see light at the end of the tunnel, now that opening day is not too far off in the distance, I'm like, we can dial it back a little.
I wouldn't be able to handle a Hunter or Lodolo injury notification in the middle of spring training.
I can't do it. We just gotta get me to this. Just get me to the season.
We're gonna start opening day with no major injuries.
That's what we're.
Keep it out there. Put that in the atmosphere. Just.
I knocked on Reed's first place 2010 geography B plaque. So
I've never, I'm only in there once every couple years it seems, but I've never really taken a look at what's all on that. Old
There's some good stuff over here.
Great stuff.
There's some good stuff over here. Story behind it all.
The transition into the Bengals quick. We're going to get to some buy or sell coming up around the corner, and Jason Fitz is going to come on. We're going to talk more Bengals and NFL offseason stuff with him. Yesterday, we briefly threw out, I think Tee Higgins, real quick on this. Tee Higgins needs to be a Cincinnati Bengal in 2025. Yes. I think we all agree on that. I'm not advocating that he shouldn't, but in the scenario in which he is not a Bengal in 2025, we could start talking about some of those scenarios of, what's the second best option for the Bengals? The first best option is Tee Higgins is a Bengal. He's a part of the core of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and him moving forward. The second best option is why one of the options for putting the tag on him or going to put the tag on him is to give them more time to find a trade suitor to be able to maximize this. One thing we said briefly, and I started looking more into it as the day went on yesterday, and I touched on it on my show once I had more time to look into it. In passing yesterday, Jake, you brought up Terry McLaurin as a potential piece that if you're the Bengals and you call the Washington Commanders, and again, we're not advocating that the Bengals need to trade Tee Higgins, so everyone relax. But assuming that they have reached that point where they are looking to move on from Tee Higgins and get something in return, there is a move that I actually really, really like, and I think it's probably it makes the most of that scenario. This scenario makes the most sense for what they should do. There was the mock draft that came out last week, and I remember, Jake, I'm kind of surprised that Mel Kiper and some of the ESPN folks had the Washington Commanders going with the Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. Not that you can't have too many good wide receivers, but they're also being tied into some other free agent name wide receivers this upcoming offseason as well. So I thought that was interesting that there would be Emeka Egbuka plus Washington being in on the name of Tee Higgins and some other names that are out there to keep an eye on if you're the Commanders. But we said Terry McLaurin is a good trade piece to keep an eye on because I went and looked at it. He is a true number one wide receiver. He has put up 1,000-yard plus seasons with some bum quarterbacks throwing him the football, by the way. The guy could play wide receiver. We know that. But the most thing about him is how much he gets paid. He's a number one wide receiver that gets just south of $16 million a year. And if you are the Cincinnati Bengals, if you are deciding to move on from Tee Higgins, I would contact the Washington Commanders and say, I want Terry McLaurin in a third or Terry McLaurin in something, and you can have Tee Higgins. to get Terry McLaurin, a number 1 wide receiver, as your number 2 option in Cincinnati behind Jamar Chase, you would get Terry McLaurin at half the price of Tee Higgins. I think that, again, they should not move on from Tee. But if they move on from Tee, I think that there is no better option than this one if the Commanders are willing to play ball. I think it's a win-win for both teams. You get younger at wide receiver if you're the Washington Commanders. You get your true number 1 wide receiver there. You get more, length out of him. And then if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you get a true number 1 wide receiver for your number 2 option at half the price of Tee Higgins. Now you have $15 million additional dollars to go patch some holes on the defense, and you get 2 years of Terry McLaurin. I think it's a win-win for both sides. I really, really like that move if you're the Bengals, if they do decide to move on from Tee Higgins.
I think if you reach that point of no return that we all hope never comes in Cincinnati this year, where Tee Higgins isn't going to sign an extension and he's not going to be a Bengal in 2025, then I would operate in a very similar way to the way the San Francisco 49ers operated this offseason with Brandon Ayuk. I would offer trades to wherever, he can work out a trade to, and those destinations would have to return me a pretty solid wide receiver too. And if they are unable to do that, then it would have to be a first-round pick plus. And that return starts getting pretty steep. And then hopefully at the 11th to 12th hour, you get an extension done. So that's how I would operate this offseason. But if the Bengals do move off of Tee Higgins, I think that's a great way to look. Terry McLaurin would be an awesome fit. The Commanders would like to sync some contracts with Jaden Daniels' rookie deal. You pay Tee Higgins a lot of money now on a 3-year, 4-year deal. That lines up perfectly with the last 3 years and 5th-year option of Jaden Daniels' rookie contract. So I think that's the route the Commanders and the Patriots and even the Bears, to an extent, are going to try to go this offseason. And I think all those teams could be interested in Tee Higgins on the open market, which obviously he won't hit now. So it comes down to what kind of return can you give the Bengals. And I don't know what the bidding war for Tee Higgins is going to be. I think that's the biggest question, because if there is somewhat of a bidding war that happens for him, if a bunch of teams do want to make the trade for him, then maybe a guy like Terry McLaurin is used by a team like the Commanders to push them over the edge, because there's not a lot of teams that would be willing to trade a receiver with the production that Terry McLaurin has. I mean, I'm sure there's some other guys out there that we could throw in the mix for a player-for-player trade for Tee Higgins, but that would certainly be interesting, and it would do away with my biggest concern of letting Tee Higgins walk, and that's replacing Tee Higgins. We have so many holes on this team. If you let Tee Higgins go, you have to draft a wide receiver at 17, or one of your biggest free agency contracts has to be to a receiver that's worse than Tee Higgins. I think Terry McLaurin's worse than Tee Higgins, but I don't think it's by very much. And then you don't have to use your first-round pick on a wide receiver. You probably still get a higher mid-round pick in return, and you can use that to help some of those other holes on the team. I think that would be a really exciting move, and one of few I would be in on for moving Tee Higgins.
Fair enough. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kidder, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN Wing AM in Dayton. We'll step away for a few moments. We'll get into a couple buy or sells, and then once we get Jason Fitz on, we'll transition over to him. So we'll be right back. More Off the Bench when we come back. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Yahoo Sports, Jason Fitz. He's going to hang out with us coming up here around the corner. A little buy or sell action here on a Wednesday. We talked about it yesterday briefly. But we're so worried about the Reds and the future of Elliot De La Cruz in Cincinnati and what it's going to be like when I think we all know that the likelihood of him staying in Cincinnati long term is very slim, but it's still going to be a gut punch when that time comes. One organization that's dealing with that right now with their very own version of Elliot De La Cruz is the Toronto Blue Jays. News or not news that the Blue Jays cannot get a deal done with Vlad Guerrero Jr., who has basically let it be known that he will not be doing any negotiations throughout the season, which basically puts him in position where he will hit the free agent market after this upcoming season. News or not news, Vlad Guerrero and the Blue Jays not getting a deal done.
Do we still call it the free agent market for players like Vlad? Or is it just the wait to sign with the Dodgers market?
I think that's the wait to sign.
This will be news, and it's news because it's congratulations to our number one GM in baseball, whatever that guy's name is, of the Dodgers. Right. So kudos to him on their new first baseman. I don't know what they'll do with Freddie, but maybe they play Vlad at third. They'll figure it out. But yeah, it stinks. I mean, the Blue Jays are in on every player, and then they can't even get their own guy to stay home. So yeah, it's tough. It's news because it seems like great players continue to just go to the few teams.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's news because I think that Vladdy. People forget I was at his debut game in Toronto.
People do forget that.
People do forget it, and I think that when you have a franchise player, seemingly a franchise player, you want to do everything you can to keep him, and I think they have. To the Blue Jays' credit, I haven't seen anything that says otherwise. They've tried to bring in talent. They've tried. At least they make the appearance that they try, which that's pretty much all that counts anyway. So I think it's news in the fact that it's becoming increasingly frustrating for everybody that if you're not a top 3 GM, if you're not a top 3 owner, you're not going to really have a shot. And that's what's wrong with baseball. That's the fundamental issue. You're not going to get a guy at a hometown discount. I don't know why Jose Ramirez signed with Cleveland for that deal. I have no idea why, because he's worth, if he's not worth Juan Soto money, he's worth pretty damn close to it. So, that's the only one I can think of where it's been just almost charity by a guy. And by the way, I credit Jose Ramirez greatly for that. Because very few guys are like, you know what? I like the city. I don't really want to leave. I'm making a lot of money. The difference between $100 million and $150 million, is it that much? What's the difference between $200 million and $250? The crazy part is once you start reaching the difference between $500 and $800 million. I don't even know what goes through your brain, because that's what Vladdy's probably weighing. I don't know how much that guy is going to get paid, but the Dodgers are looking at him and they're like, you know what? I don't know what we can do. We'll just push that contract back to 2057 and we'll pay him $2 million this year and worry about the rest at a later date, and we'll just bring the whole super team here to LA.
Question: Do you think that the Guardians knew that they were going to get Ramirez at a discount? And the reason I ask is because if the Guards knew that they were going to get Ramirez at a discount, do you think that they would have pulled the trigger on keeping Francisco Lindor as well? Because we looked at the numbers last year. If the Guardians, with Ramirez's contract on the books, if they would have paid Francisco Lindor exactly what he got from the Mets, the Guardians would only be up to number 18. They would still only have the 18th highest payroll in baseball. It wouldn't be super egregious. It's not like it would have put them in the top 12 or something wild, or whatever. Do you think that they knew that they were going to get him at a discount? And if they would have known that at the time that they let Lindor go, do you think that they would have tried to find a way to keep both?
I think that they did not know, but yes, I do think they would have tried to probably get both had they known. It's just one of those things where I think Jose Ramirez is like, he probably told his agent, I know I can get better elsewhere. We won't tell him that, but I know I can get better elsewhere. I just like Cleveland. I just want to stay here. It's my home now. And I have no issue with that whatsoever. I think that probably would have changed the Guardians' philosophy, or the Indians at the time philosophy, going forward for sure. I'm surprised the Guardians GM, I don't know who that guy would be, I'm surprised he wasn't on that top 10 list either, because the Guardians, say whatever you want about them, say that they never spend, say that they trade all their talent away, but they're always somewhat competitive. I know the AL Central isn't a juggernaut, but it is a testament to how good of an organization they've run. I saw the Rays GM was ranked 3rd on that list. Mm-hmm. I think the Guardians guy, might be a top 10. I need to know the name, so fault of my own for not knowing that information. But I think it's a well-run organization. We can bash on them, we can say whatever we want, but at the end of the day, they're fighting for World Series seemingly like every 5 years. So what do I know?
Michael Chernoff is the general manager for the Cleveland Guardians. And you know what? As much as I bury that organization because they drive me nuts, this goes back to my point earlier, though. Don't confuse the general manager with the team ownership, because the general manager, I'm pretty sure that the general manager for any team out there would love the Dodgers funds. That's why I had a problem with the Dodgers general manager being ranked number one, because I'm like, how tough is his job? I think I can go with the money that the budget that he's given, I can go land Shohei Ohtani with the Dodgers, right? Like, I think that's pretty easy. But you're right, Elliot. I do think Chernoff should be in the top 10 for the Guardians, just considering that he did convince Ramirez to take a team discount in some capacity, and they've been able, without spending any money, still being able to put a contender out there each and every year. You had the Yankees and the Guardians, and you had the Mets and the Dodgers in the AL and NL Championship Series last year. Three of those four teams are in the top 5 in spending in baseball. And then there's the Guardians all the way at the back for the 5th straight season, a half decade. All right. 5 straight years where they've been in the bottom 5 in spending in baseball. And yet there they were, and probably going to be right back there again this season. So either way, but let's bring on our guest, Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, we appreciate your time. I know last week you're a little under the weather. We appreciate that you're giving us time this week, though. Welcome on the show.
Hey, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, I came back from New Orleans with the flu and pneumonia combined, so that was a glorious few days. But hey, got to be around the Super Bowl experience. I feel like everybody down there got sick, so you guys dodged a bullet for sure.
Yeah, we thought we were the cool ones for not going to the Super Bowl. So there you go. But no, we welcome you back. Look, you know what's interesting? I don't know how much of our conversation you've caught, but like baseball is having this problem. We as Reds fans, you have Elliot De La Cruz, who we're already like. By the way, we still get 3 more years of Elliot De La Cruz, but we spend all of our time complaining because we're not going to be able to keep him in 3 years or 4 years. You have the Blue Jays, who just lost Vlad Guerrero Jr., or probably will lose him after this upcoming season. You have these markets in baseball that are they're so miserable because they can't find a way to keep their stars. Then you have the NBA, who the Dallas Mavericks they send off Luka Doncic. Of course, there's reports of the Grizzlies potentially looking to move on from Ja after this upcoming season. It's kind of wild how both sports are they're doing the opposites of one another. You have baseball who can't keep their stars, and NBA teams who are like, yeah, someone come and take them. It doesn't make any sense to me.
But the common thread, and where both are broken, is that there's so little hope to any of it, right? Like, if you think about what it means and what it was supposed to mean when Zion and Ja were picked 1 and 2 respectively, you could turn around and say, oh, this is the moment everything turns around. But didn't we all automatically assume that the clock would begin ticking right away on when these guys would eventually either be shipped out somewhere else or turn out to be a bust? And when you mentioned Major League Baseball, I understand the economics of certain teams. We all get it. And I loved your joke about like waiting to get to the Dodgers, but like, there is some element of what makes the NFL simply the NFL is that already right now we are barely a week removed from the Super Bowl, and there are fan bases. Like we did a piece on our show this week where we were giving out harsh truths to every team, and so we were hard on the Bears and why Ben Johnson could turn out to not to be the perfect coach, and I'm getting just killed on Twitter for it. Like, I'm getting killed on social media because Bears fans have already convinced themselves that they are going to be the division champions next year. So like the hardest part of what you mentioned when you talk about what happens to these star players is how despondent fan bases feel, because in most sports, right now, if you don't really have a window to win anything. And so you're just basically occupying time and money while you're waiting for the players that you love to eventually play somewhere else for a championship. That's a junk feeling.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, jumping on with us here again off the bench. Justin Kenner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett. We're going to step away for just a brief moment, and we'll come back for our final segment on radio, at least, when we come back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back off the bench. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Of course, we appreciate you listening in Dayton on ESPN 1410 Wing AM. Continuing on here on a Wednesday, Yahoo Sports, Jason Fitz hanging out with us here today. And, of course, he kind of jumped on with us in the middle of our conversation about, Vlad Guerrero and the Blue Jays, Elliot de la Cruz and the Reds, this, that, and the other. But we wanted to have you come on to talk about, outside of the season for the NFL, I guess off-season talk is just as fun. At a certain point, though, it runs its course, and we're just itching for football to come back. But I guess there's so many question marks for so many teams, including the team that we talk about the most, the Cincinnati Bengals, and we'll get to them in a moment, Jason. But you were at the Super Bowl. I think that it's not a surprise that the Chiefs lost. I guess it's the surprise of how they lost. I mean, it was kind of weird watching them not just lose, but get beat down the way that they did, because it got to a point where we're like, we just can't bet against. You can't bet against the Chiefs. You just cannot bet against the Chiefs, no matter what. But the Eagles just reminded everybody why they were so dominant all season, and they dominated the Chiefs. At what point did it start becoming a surprise to you at the way that the Chiefs were losing? Not just that they lost, but how they lost.
Second drive. I mean, it was so clear, and I kept sitting here saying, man, how did we not all see this coming? Because what's the other big Super Bowl loss we've seen for the Chiefs? It's when their offensive line just couldn't do anything to hold back Tampa Bay, and Patrick Mahomes was running for his life. You could see early on in this that even when they tried to shift the pocket around, which is what most of us expected, it didn't really matter. And watching Kelsey be slow was just sort of, we've seen it this year, but we haven't seen it in that moment. And so you just early on, you felt like they couldn't get any separation. They couldn't figure out how to get the ball out of Mahomes' hands quickly enough. And then all of a sudden he started to feel the heat. And I think he started to rush some things. And so for me, I'm watching this thinking, my God, like you mentioned the Bengals, for every team in the AFC that's sitting here saying, how do we beat the Chiefs? The diagram is there. Like the path is there. The plan is there. It's not easy to have the best defensive line in football, but like if you consistently want to take down Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs, the way you do that is with the defensive line. They can absolutely crush you from everywhere, and you don't even have to blitz. Like that was the craziest part of what we saw from the game plan, is that they never had to send extra because they knew they could get home with what they had, and then there was just no answer for that for Kansas City.
Seems like a fork in the road type of offseason for the Chiefs. It's wild. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls. They went 15-2. They got to their third straight Super Bowl. But, of course, I know we overreact to wins and losses, but that loss seemed to be glaring because I think that loss, like, it kind of exposed them a bit. It's not like they lost a 23-20 final where it was a slugfest and either team could have won. They were outmatched, and I think they finally got exposed. We kept watching the Chiefs all year, and it was kind of one of those, like, well, they keep finding ways to win games. That's what good teams do. But they got exposed. They have some deficiencies. They have some things they need to address in the offseason. Are the Chiefs how far off are they? Did they take a major step back just based on what you saw in that Super Bowl? What kind of offseason do you expect for them? How many do they need to change up their offensive approach? I mean, what is it about the Chiefs right now that you're looking at heading into the offseason?
I think getting Rashee Rice back is going to help with some of the dynamic offense, and then they have to fix the offensive line. But the funny thing is, we all want to make it sound like the Chiefs are broken, but in reality, like this Chiefs team, as broken as they are, still went to the Super Bowl. And so then you apply a little bit of the NBA matchups conversation, like the playoffs in basketball is all about matchups, right? Well, playoff football, I mean, look at the matchups and then ask yourself, how many teams in the AFC are built? And this is what I would scream to Bengals fans. I understand everybody wants Tee Higgins back and you want this big offense, but that doesn't beat Kansas City. Like the path to beating Kansas City is, can your defensive line abuse them up front? There just aren't any the Steelers maybe have a defensive line that can do that, but the rest of the Steelers team is so bad that I'm not worried about them if I'm Kansas City. The Chargers are trying to build that sort of a team. It's going to take some time to do it, but I think frankly this is why you saw last offseason the Raiders invest $100 million in Christian Wilkins, because they hoped that Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins together could do exactly what we saw over the weekend or over the Super Bowl. So, look, the Chiefs are going to have to clean up some offensive things. They're going to have to figure out their offensive line. But does that suddenly mean they're not the favorite in the AFC next year? No, because as bad as they were in the Super Bowl, they were still in the Super Bowl because teams that are at the upper echelon, the Bills, the Ravens, we thought the Bengals, aren't built in a way that actually challenges what Kansas City needs to have challenged to win.
Let me ask you this. Speaking of the Bengals, and you brought up Tee Higgins, and I don't like talking about this every single day, but we have to until some sort of resolution is solved. I think the Bengals actually have gotten more airtime on ESPN and everywhere over the last 2 weeks than we've ever had. I think they had more airtime than we went to when we went to the Super Bowl. But saying that, you said you don't want to pay this big offense, or not you saying that, but you don't have to pay this big offense, right? You don't have to pay 2 elite wide receivers top dollar. Do you trust that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be able to survive without him? That's my question. The Bengals are really, really good with Tee Higgins. They are not as good without him. I think they have a losing record without him.
Are they? I mean, they're 9-8 last year on an MVP caliber year with the Super Bowl, with a Super Bowl caliber quarterback that should be one of the 2 or 3 best in the entire league at his position, and he had an MVP caliber year, and you won 9 games. So, I hear you. I genuinely do. But I think what's happening here is everybody's chasing the Eagles without really looking at the math of the way the Eagles do business. The Eagles have paid a lot of people, but how does Howie Roseman do that? He pays them so early that he's always ahead of the contract spend. So if you were going to keep Jamar and T both, which I think is a smart strategy at some point, the time to do that was 2 years ago to get ahead of some of the wide receiver market, but you didn't do that. So now you're in a Cowboys situation where you're overpaying for the talent that you want to keep in the door. And the other part of it is, do you have a GM that is as good as Howie Roseman at finding, the secondary that they completely – Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were both there for the entire league. It's the Eagles that got lucky enough to take them. They did the smart thing, best player available, and they addressed their weaknesses. There are reasons Jalen Carter was still available in the draft, but they took him and they managed to clean up his life and get the best out of him. If you are going to pay all of your weapons on offense, you have to pay them early, and you have to trust that your team will draft at a Hall of Fame level on the defensive side of the ball. I don't trust the Bengals to do any of that. So how do you beat Kansas City if you're not able to draft at a level that the Eagles have drafted? And keeping Tee Higgins makes everybody feel good because you're comfortable with it and you win more games, but you won 9 games last year. This is the hardest part about it is you just weren't – the result wasn't good enough last year considering the amount of talent that they had.
What do you think brings more criticism? Let's say the Bengals keep Tee Higgins and Trey Hendrickson, but then, they still go through a draft, another mediocre draft. They don't draft anybody great. Maybe you get somebody in there that can contribute a little bit on defense, but you don't really add any big free agents. Or they take away Tee Higgins, they take away Trey Hendrickson, they trade them both for draft picks. They try to improve that way, and they allow the front office to spend elsewhere, right? Which do you think would draw more criticism from the national media? I mean, not that the Bengals should be making moves based on what the media thinks, but it is a storyline that the Bengals are notoriously a cheap franchise.
Yeah, and that's where I want to put Trey and T in 2 different buckets, right? It is so hard to find a pass rusher, and you've got one. So you've got a pass rusher, and you need pass rushers to beat the Chiefs. All right, go spend, right? Because we can make the same argument. I just made the argument, hey, you're not winning games. Well, Myles Garrett certainly hasn't helped the Browns win a bunch of football games, and he's the best in the league. Max Crosby hasn't helped the Raiders win a bunch of football games, and he's one of the best in the league, right? So, there is sort of a fine line on all of this. But to me, you're going to have the pass rush. So knowing that I put myself in this situation where I got to keep Jamar and I got to keep Trey, that's what makes T somewhat expendable in this process. And don't get me wrong. I believe T is a number 1 wide receiver. There's no doubt about it. I think that the Bengals are in a situation where they might need 7 or 8 new guys on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think you get that in one offseason. So, at some point, you've got to start figuring out what you're going to do to compete on both sides. Complementary football is a phrase that we roll our eyes at, but complementary football is truly how teams win, and the Bengals have none of that right now.
I think one of the biggest issues to me, at least, is and you bring it up, our defense 100%, the Bengals defense, not ours, the Bengals defense 100% cannot be fixed in just one offseason alone. Not with the budget that the Bengals have. So saying that, you're in an AFC North, you have the Steelers who are just going to keep going through a carousel of quarterbacks until the sun burns out. They'll be 9-8. The Cleveland Browns, respectfully, Justin, are the worst franchise I've seen. And then you have the Ravens, right? It's the Ravens and the Bengals for this division, and I think it's a win-now mode always. So how do you navigate a win-now mode always? Well, it's also Baseball has we're going to reset. Next year we're going to tank, we're going to be terrible, we're going to win 58 games, and then maybe the year after that, and we'll keep reloading prospects until the sun burns out. Twice, by the way, in that segment. But it's one of those things that the Bengals have to navigate, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. So can you navigate rebuilding a defense while also staying competitive? And in my opinion, a very winnable division.
Yeah, it is a winnable division. You're right. And look, the Ravens also, I've covered Derrick Henry for his entire career. I don't think that there's ever a cliff that I would anticipate Derrick Henry falls off. But at some point, it's got to happen. And when that happens, the Ravens take a big step back. I also agree with you. I think the Steelers are, for the next several years, they are just up a creek at the quarterback position. There's no easy answer. So the Steelers don't scare me in the AFC. And I think the Browns, they're going to have to select a quarterback in a year that's terrible to need a quarterback at the top of the draft. So, the rest of the division is in shambles. To your point, though, I would just say let's put different helmets on. If we were talking about the Cowboys, because that's the team we always talk about, like the Cowboys out here, if the Cowboys have sat here and they've paid Dak and they've paid CeeDee and they eventually pay Parsons, right? Like they pay those three guys. That's the very reason we sit here and say, well, they can't win because they haven't built the rest of the roster. So they got three great players. So like the hard part about that is, I think if you just take the Bengals fandom for everybody listening aside and you separate all that, it takes an entire roster. And I'll go back to, I'm wearing a Raiders hoodie as we do this for anybody watching online. I watched the Raiders in a year where Amari Cooper caught over 1,000 yards worth of passes. Josh Jacobs led the NFL in rushing that year, and Max Crosby led the NFL in sacks that year. And the Raiders won 6 games. And so, those are the moments that I sit there and say, hey, you can have great pieces, but you got to have, ask yourself this. How many players starting on the Bengals defense would start on a high-level playoff caliber defense? How many? And if the answer to that is 2 or 3, now you're saying, okay, we might need 8 new starters on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. I don't know how you get 8 new starters on the defensive side of the ball while you also, at this point, overpay to keep 2 superstar wide receivers, because you're going to have to overpay compared to market value. And you're going to have to pay Burrow for as long as his history. Those things just don't all stack together in a way that makes sense.
What do you make of the Joe Burrow media circus when he went around and on 10 different shows pleading to the Bengals, essentially, I would really like you to pay Tee Higgins. I'd really like you to pay Trey Hendrickson. We'd like to run it back. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback do that. He didn't plug one product. He was just out there plugging the fact that he wants to win games, and the best way he feels is to bring back T and Trey. Do you think that says more about Joe Burrow, or do you think that says more about the Cincinnati Bengals?
I think it says a lot about where current mindset of players are, because Myles Garrett has made it clear. And look, I talked to Max Crosby for a while at the Super Bowl, and he made it clear, hey, I got money on my contract that needs to be figured out, and I need to know what the plan is for the organization to win games. Players at the NFL level are starting to speak out, because I think we see this player empowerment world of the NBA, and it sort of gets in your mind, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go out and speak my piece. The problem is the NFL is just built so wildly different. I get what Joe Burrow wants, and certainly if he feels like these guys give him the best chance to win, he's earned the right as a quarterback to stand up and say, here's what gives us the best chance to win. But realistically, the Bengals have to give that grace and consideration. That's the job of anybody that has a franchise quarterback. But you can't let your franchise quarterback be your GM. Got to make tough decisions. Yeah. And that sometimes means, I'm certain that there were years that Tom Brady would have looked around and said, why don't I have a Randy Moss this year? Why are you making this so difficult? I'm sure that there's a piece of Mahomes that's looking around saying, why have you made this so difficult year in and year out? But as an organization, you can give that some weight, but man, the guys running the team have to be very confident, and that's asking a lot. Can you be more confident than Joe Burrow? Because that's what you have to. You got to be able to out-swagger Joe Burrow when it comes to, okay, I know what you want, but this is why we're doing what we're doing, and you have to respect it. Because if you can't out-swagger him on it, he won't respect you.
It's awesome enough to give us some time here today on Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Jason, last thing before we let you go. So with that being said, it's a big offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals, ad nauseum. We're talking a lot, of course, about Tee Higgins. But at some point that we're going to get an answer on that. It might be, a couple months, but we're going to be spending some time on it. What's your gut telling you at the end of the day? Is Tee Higgins a Cincinnati Bengal in 2025 when the season kicks off in week 1?
Yeah, I think he is. I think Tee Higgins is a Cincinnati Bengal. If I ran the Bengals, I would franchise him and I would work out a sign-in trade. I'd get the best I can out of him and I'd start working towards building the rest of my roster out. That's what I would do. But I think what the Bengals are telling you right now is that they understand that they have some superstar pieces and they're going to invest in those superstar pieces. And I understand the short-term philosophy of it. I don't think it suddenly makes Cincinnati a 12-win team next year. I don't think it suddenly makes the Bengals better than Kansas City. So the only thing I'd tell Bengals fans is start paying attention to the end of April, because if you are going to pay Tee Higgins, then that means you cannot miss at all. You can no longer miss in the first, second, or third rounds of the draft. You need starters, viable starters, day one starters in the first 3 rounds of the draft. Once you start paying that many guys, that many things. And I'll give everybody this nugget. I haven't looked at it in the last 2 years, so it might have changed. But before I left ESPN, I had them turn around and look at highest paid player at their respective positions over a 15-year period. The only player that was the highest paid at his position that won a Super Bowl in any year he was highest paid was Gronk. Every other person that ever won a Super Bowl at every position was not the highest paid that year at their position. So I just remind you that the actual math says you can't pay anybody and win Super Bowls. It doesn't say you can't pay Super Bowls. It says you can't really pay anybody and win Super Bowls. It feels like a weird logic, but look at what the Eagles did. They had pushed all of this money way down the pipeline. They are not worried about it now, and they're able to continue to build a team right now that they can win with. That's the same thing the Chiefs have tried to figure out how to do. But to do that, you have got to draft incredibly well. So you got to draft well, and you've got to make sure that you're smart in who you sign. Does that sound like anything the Bengals have done over the last 5 to 10 years? I'm not trying to be harsh on the team. It just, that's the reality. There is not an easy situation. You have to do things the right way for a long time to win football games.
What the hell? I'll throw one more at you just because I know Bengals fans get mad when I talk Browns, but it's on the way out. The Browns are going to draft Shedeur Sanders. Things will not go well in the first season. They'll fire Kevin Stefanski, and Deion Sanders is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns in 2026. Buy or sell?
I'll buy that. I'll buy that. I don't think Shedeur works out well anywhere he's drafted. I think if Cam or Shedeur is asked to play year one, no matter where they're drafted, everybody there is gonna regret it. I think both guys need time. And I think that it's real. Jackson Dart is moving up draft boards. That is real. I've talked to enough people that is a very real thing, kind of like Bo Nix did last year. So Jackson Dart's going to be in this conversation too. If any team takes them and then decides they don't need to play year one, I would feel so much better about it, including the Browns. Unfortunately, I just don't know if you're the Browns what other solution you have. You got to draft a quarterback now because there's nothing at the position and you can't afford anybody at the position. So yeah, Kevin Stefanski is going to be a hell of a coach somewhere not named Cleveland in a year.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, awesome enough to give us time today. Jason, thank you. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon. Appreciate you as always.
Appreciate you, boys.
All right, good stuff. Justin Kinner, Elliot Ring, Jacob Tissett with you here again off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. That wraps it up for us. We are out of time. Guys, closing thoughts as we bid farewell.
Well, as we round out the radio, I'd like to say thank you to everybody, and especially Jacob. Jacob did a great job at producing today. Not one mistake.
That. Thank you.
And I'd like to also apologize to Justin. I apologize for my brown stray. Every once in a while, I'm just too in my head, and I have to.
No, you don't.
I have to give him. Yeah, I do a little
Your
bit.
apologies mean nothing when there's 5 brown strays a week.
You're right. Well,
every time you
can have one. You can have one of them. I'll tell you what. I'll give you this. Good.
It's like when people say no offense, but it's going to be offensive. No matter what happens after you say no offense, it's going to be offensive. That's what always happens. And Elliot just does it in reverse. He does the insult and then says no offense. Like it's reverse order.
We have 2 super chats too. I forgot 2 super chats before we end radio. $5 from the amazing fetus. Fix the camera, Kinner, and happy birthday to Casey. I haven't known anything. There's been a camera bit this entire time.
I don't understand the bit.
I don't understand the bit either. Whose camera's tilted? I don't get it.
Ours can't be.
Ours literally can't be.
Kinner's doesn't look tilted.
Is my camera tilted?
It doesn't look like it.
I don't think it's tilted.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
This building stinks. This building in Dayton is horrible.
Maybe the building's tilted.
It's a Ripley's Believe It or Not.
And Justin Edgel yesterday gave a super chat that we didn't read. He wanted to ask Kinner, how many cigarettes do you smoke a day?
I do not smoke cigarettes. I secondhand. It's much cheaper.
There we go. Balling on a budget.
Yeah. No, I do not smoke cigarettes. All good.
We love our super
All right, guys,
chats.
we're out of time. Yeah, but hey, good questions. Keep them coming. I do want to find out if the camera's actually tilted. I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
I'm looking at it right now. I don't think it's. Oh, wait. Oh wait, I do see what they're saying.
Is it?
It's the blinds, because if you look at the blinds,
but Kinner looks straight.
Yeah, I know. That's the part that's throwing me off.
But yeah, we're done until tomorrow. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
Oh, yes. Welcome back, YouTube. We only got a couple minutes here, but I wanted to come back and say, A, we will have box lunch in a little bit, probably about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. So what will that be, 12, 15? We will see you there if you are a member. We might do T-shirt game today. We haven't done T-shirt game in a while. So if we're able,
the T-shirt game is the one you should play if we don't have a full.
I agree.
Quiplash.
I think
unit.
I agree. Other than that, I don't have a ton to add. I did see that the Hines, so Nate Seltzer, credit to Nate, and then credit to Charlie for actually putting in the news. Reese Hines is now number 57.
Love that.
And then the ketchup brand is Heinz 57.
Correct.
So he's Heinz 57.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal bit.
I think if you have a last name like that, everyone should do that.
I agree. If you have
Andre Kirilenko being number 47, you got to do whatever you have to do to make it work.
You have to. Let me ask you this too. Actually, Reese Hines. We haven't. That's a name we won't talk about probably for a while. If he has a good, and I don't like, he was on the roster for so long and didn't play hardly at all after the 2-week miracle stretch. That's a guy I want to see more. I don't know why we didn't see him more towards the end of last year. I know the analytics probably disagreed with me, but I'd argue if the team was already uncompetitive, they literally didn't have a starting pitcher down the stretch.
The thing it seems like you're forgetting is that he only succeeded against the bad teams, whereas the other guys we had up on the roster didn't succeed against anybody.
Yeah, you're right.
Why would you play him if he was only good against the White Sox and the Marlins if no one else can hit anybody?
That's the part of it that was just so
Never
crazy.
Understood it.
It was just so crazy. Was that David Bell? I don't want to blame David Bell.
I don't know.
But was that David Bell?
Probably.
I don't want to blame David Bell.
You know what? What if we just both go 360? We're already towing the line of a 360 here. What if we just go, last year was 100% David Bell's fault. This is a 100-win ball club.
Okay, I can be talked into that.
David Bell cost this team 40 wins.
I can be talked. You know what? I can be talked into that. David Bell lost this team every single game last year by himself, single-handedly. Didn't do enough. David Bell, if you're out there and you're listening to this, which I'm sure you're not, I love you, David, and I'm sorry this fan base took you down. But we're very happy to have Terry. So sorry about that.
Very happy to have
We're very, very happy to have Terry Francona. But that's it for us today. Sorry, a bit of a crazy show. Everybody tune in tomorrow. We will be talking the Bearcats. I'm sure everybody in this chat loves to talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. The season's on the line tonight. We'll see everybody there. I saw Sean and our guy, both Sean's. Sean and Sean were talking about the Bearcats' strength of schedule and what it takes to get in. I think David was getting in on that as well. So
a lot of lively debate in the chat today.
A lot of lively debate in the chat today. Everybody, thank you very, very, very much, and we will see you tomorrow. Box lunch at about 10 to 15.